Thanks for having me here. I'm going to be talking about my doctoral thesis, which deals with controversies surrounding anti-Semitism on the left in France and Germany between 2000 and 2020, and I insist on this notion of a controversy. In the 2000s and the 2010s, there has been a clear increase in France and Germany in anti-Semitic acts, including 14 murders in France compared to the previous decades. Even though the Jewish population in France accounts for less than 1% of the French population, anti-Semitism accounts for 1/3 of racist and xenophobic acts recorded by the Ministry of the Interior in 2019. Within the discussions on the carrier groups and causes of this anti-Semitism, the role of the left has been regularly pointed out on both sides of the Rhine. For some of the research on contemporary anti-Semitism and for state and also civil society actors in charge of the fight against anti-Semitism or who speak out on the subject, the left is said to promote a new anti-Semitism by demonizing Israel, by refusing to recognize anti-Semitism when it emanates from populations that are themselves victims of discrimination, by denying the scope of contemporary anti-Semitism, which supposedly has been replaced by anti-Muslim racism. Pierre-André Taguieff uses the expression new Judeophobia rather than anti-Semitism to underline this novelty. It is this actual or supposed centrality of the left and its role in the production of contemporary anti-Semitism that I examine in my thesis. I proceed to a comparison of the way in which the left's relationship to anti-Semitism is constructed within a set of controversies in both countries between 2000 and 2020. While the theme of an anti-Semitism of and on the left is found in both countries, the way in which the debates around this question are posed, the actors who participate in them, the definitions of anti-Semitism that are mobilized, and the social arenas in which they take place differ in many ways. The question of the left's relationship to anti-Semitism arises in two ways. First, as an object of internal debate among the forces of the left, and second, in the often conflicting interactions between actors of the left and those of the struggle against anti-Semitism. The state of the discussions in one country remains little known and little taken into account in the debates taking place in the other. So, my research question, or at least temporary research question, is the following. In France and Germany, what factors determine the position of the left in the face of anti-Semitism and the general direction of the debates on this issue? Faced with the question of anti-Semitism, the German and French left tend to adopt positions that are often diametrically opposed. In France, left-wing intellectuals often try to counter accusations of anti-Semitism aimed at the left by disputing the extent and scope of contemporary anti-Semitism. The thematization of anti-Semitism, particularly because it is often the work of rather centrist or conservative intellectuals or politicians, such as Alain Finkielkraut, is seen as an instrument of power to delegitimize the anti-Zionist and anti-racist commitments of the left or social movements, as during the Yellow Vest episode in 2018-2019. The German left, on the contrary, is much more polarized around the issue of anti-Semitism. Since the 1980s, following a confrontation with Germany's National Socialist past and with the anti-Semitic tendencies of the anti-imperialist movement of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, a large part of the left has developed a heightened sensitivity to anti-Semitism as well as a pro-Israeli orientation, even if anti-imperialist and anti-Zionist movements remain. When studying the object, the first question which arises is the following: how do we define the left? My approach involves not starting for a prior delimitation of the left. Rather, I want to see how the relation to anti-Semitism participates in the self-definition of the left through, for example, in France, the fracture between, on the one hand, a neo-social democratic or populist left, such as the France Insoumise, and a radical left, such as the new anti-capitalist party, which both have strong anti-Zionist leanings, and on the other, a more liberal centrist left, with the Parti Socialiste or SOS Racisme, which is a anti-racist organization. And this more centrist left is also more sensitive to the issue of anti-Semitism and supportive of Israel. Moreover, contrary to other approaches, the controversy lens implies not to start with a prior definition of anti-Semitism. That does not mean that I don't adhere to one definition or the other, but it does mean that at the start of my research, I kind of suspend the use of one particular definition in order to be more attentive to the conflicts around definitions and to see how, in a given framework and conjuncture, a particular definition is imposed. It is only after the restitution of those conflicts around anti-Semitism within the framework of a critical reflection on my results that I will mobilize my own operative definition of anti-Semitism, which also carries certain normative positions. I'll just briefly present the controversy approach, which comes from the sociology of controversies. So the notion of controversy refers to a discursive conflict where, to quote Cyril Lemieux, a dispute between two parties is staged before an audience, a third party placed in the position of judge. Controversies distinguish themselves from one another by the nature of the audience, by their degree of containment and publicization involving a diversity of public spaces and media of varying social scope, and by the legal or cultural norms that regulate discourse. The controversy surrounding the disinvitation of post-colonial intellectual Achille Mbembe in April 2020 at the Ruhr Triennale because of his anti-Zionist positions thus began as a localized controversy in cultural and academic circles, and then quickly spread to the national and international political field through numerous contributions in the national and then international media. In contrast, the November 2020 controversy between the French anti-Zionist journalist Dominique Vidal and the left-wing Jewish group Revolutionary Jews over an accusation that Dominique Vidal minimizes anti-Semitism in his contribution to a book on racism in France was a controversy internal to the far left that took mainly place on Twitter and Facebook. The controversy approach implies, first of all, to restore the geography and the temporality of the controversies, and to do so to symmetrize the positions and presence, to adopt a certain distance towards the different positions. In order to be able to honestly reconstruct the debates, this approach implies not to try to determine who is or is not anti-Semitic in advance when faced with highly debated positions, but first to reconstruct the debates and to look at what counts as anti-Semitism for the actors, and to look at how actors negotiate negotiate around a specific analysis of anti-Semitism. Now, in my research, I intend to look at three major areas of controversy: anti-Zionism, the memory of the Holocaust and its relation to the memory of other episodes of mass violence such as slavery, the place of Jews, and the fight against anti-Semitism in the anti-racist movement. I already have an idea of some of the specific controversies I will look at, but I still need to make a definitive selection at this point. In order to understand the differentiated positions of the left in the face of anti-Semitism in both countries, I will examine the selected controversies on the basis of 7 working hypotheses concerning 7 potential explanatory factors. Now, these explanatory factors will obviously be modified or discarded as new factors emerge in the course of the exploration of the data. So I'll just quickly enumerate those 7 work hypotheses. First of all, the theoretical and ideological matrix through which the left and analyzes society. Second, the sociology and social influence of the left in both countries. Third, the presence of large social movements in which the left participates. Four, the place occupied by the memory of the Shoah in public space and the way in which the left positions itself in relation to this memory. Five, the presence or absence of a major Jewish public opinion intervening around issues of anti-Semitism. Six, the relationship to the labor movement. And seven, and finally, the relationship to the notion of people or peuple, volk, and the relationship to the nation. Just two quick words on my methodology. So I'll be conducting my study basically, first of all, by carrying out a discursive analysis of a corpus of varied texts produced by both left-wing actors and external actors mentioning and often targeting the left. And second, I will try to produce a cartography aiming to make the complexity of the positions and presence readable through graphic representations. Thanks a lot for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your questions.